The Mom View is sponsored by the Herzog Foundation, and this is going to be a great show. Joy Eakins is working hard to prove to Kansans that she should be their next governor. She has been a lifetime fighting for what's right, but when it came to the battle to save her brother from demons that plagued him, it was a different kind of struggle altogether. She tells us their stories. And then next, a former leader in the Latino Democratic Party walked away from a $2 million payout to keep quiet about what he saw behind the scenes of his now former party. That's next on The Mom View. So here we are in D.C. another week. It's pretty exciting.
Yes, welcome everyone to the Mom View.
Yeah, loving being here in D.C. Yes, welcome to the Mom View. We are thrilled to have you here again with us. We have a few more shows here in D.C. before we head to our awesome new Kansas City studio.
Yes.
We're excited about that too.
Yeah.
But being here in D.C. is pretty great because we're able to be right in the heart of the policy making, and there are a lot of great policies that are coming out of this White House. So we're
policy top leaders
Yep.
in the administration. Great discussions. People are stopping by the studio. So it's just been really wonderful. And again, it's just great to be the next grouping of tapings of the Mom View. So we're glad that you're here, moms.
And I love talking about these topics. They may be weighty, but this is really helping moms to understand what it is that we're facing and what we can do about it. That's the most important thing. Okay, we're going to inform you, but we're not just going to leave you hanging. Right. So one of the topics that we're talking about today, gender dysphoria.
Right.
And formerly known as gender identity. Right. And it was one of those things that used to be in the books that we're talking about. This is a mental health issue that we need to help them with. And largely it came because of abuse or neglect or some kind of trauma in their life.
The spectrum kids, some of the spectrum kids.
Yes,
yeah. That's kind of a new addition to this.
It is.
Is the spectrum kids.
And that brings up the whole other issue about vaccines. We'll talk about that in another show.
Yeah.
But it used to be gender identity disorder, and it was characterized by a severe and persistent discomfort in one's own biological sex. It largely happened when you were young. So when kids are young, they're obviously experimenting. They're like, okay, what is this appendage? What I mean, when my kids were in the bathtub, they're like, oh, that's interesting. Where did that come from?
Well, and let alone puberty.
Exactly.
That is such a confusing time for any young kids. We all know that as moms that is a really rough time.
Well, that's when they target them.
Right.
And they ask us, it starts with a simple question. Do you feel comfortable in your body? What 11 to 14-year-old on the planet feels comfortable?
Could you be questioning?
Yes.
And all of a sudden everybody starts questioning, and that's really what they've done a really good job on infiltrating the kids, the message, and making them feel a little bit insecure.
Yeah.
And so we've seen a lot of, this is a sad story that we're going to hear about Randy, because a lot of people that have this situation feels like if I become a man, if I become a woman, all of my issues go away. Then they become infertile. They're cutting off body parts. We have no idea what the health risks are of these puberty blockers for future. And then all of a sudden, okay, I made the transition. I've got all the so-called parts, but I'm still who I am inside.
Still a guy.
And I'm still hurt.
Yeah. So
and I still have a problem.
And they have transgender regret.
Right.
They are concerned about they start to be concerned about what they've done and how can I reverse it. And they're still not dealing with the root cause that led them to consider doing it to begin with. Yeah. And I'm very frustrated with the mental health industry. I've heard it from a lot of moms who have talked about that. And that's what we're going to be talking about with our first guest today.
Yeah. And we've heard a lot from quite a few detransitioners. We did some specials on this. We did a whole gender confusion panel, and it's the same message. I was broken. I had problems. I thought this was going to be the answer. They scared my parents into going along with this child's idea, and the suicide rates are just as if not the same, higher after. And that's what we're going to hear about today.
Yeah. And in some states, it's not even just really terrorizing the parents with these lies and deceptions, but now they've gotten the government involved in if you don't buy into it, then you're going to have your children taken away. So it's just this additional constant threats. And so I just have to, keep going back to the communist goals. And 49 is disconnect the children from the parents, make every effort in every way to pull the children away from the parents. And if you want a future that adults are not going to buy into, then you go to the children and the adults are in the way.
Right. And then you make the adults, family members, the enemy.
Yes.
And they're doing a great job on this. That's why I want to help you, moms who want to hear these stories, want to talk about these topics, because this is happening in homes all across our country.
They are. They are. So we're going to be bringing in our next guest, Joy Eakins, to talk about that very subject. Okay. And we'll be right back on The Mom View.
Hello, I'm Josh Mann, Managing Editor of The Lion. The Lion is an initiative of the Herzog Foundation, and we publish articles covering a wide range of issues facing American families and culture, especially related to the education of children. In covering these topics, we also touch on aspects of parenting, family life, faith, government, and other relevant cultural topics. We publish news stories every day aiming to produce timely, critical, must-read news articles and resources for families, educators, and leaders. Read the latest in education and cultural news at readlion.com. We also offer easy-to-digest daily and weekly email newsletters. Subscribe today at readlion.com/subscribe.
Joy Eakins is a Republican gubernatorial candidate for Kansas. But she's not here today to talk about politics or her platform. She's here to talk about her brother and only sibling, Randy. Joy, welcome to the Mom View.
Welcome, Joy.
Thank you.
Nice
Thank
to
you
have
both.
So I want to say, while you're not here to talk about the gubernatorial race, this is one of the reasons, of the many reasons, why you felt that Kansas needed some new leadership and why you decided to get in the race.
It is. I think the story that we'll talk about here with my brother highlights a little bit of the power of the American dream. In America, you can do anything you want to do, and you can escape terrible circumstances, and you can change your life. And I've been able to do that, and I think it's important that Kansas should be the best place to live the American dream, and right now it's not. And so that's why I'm running, and I think this story helps highlight some of the things that I had to overcome and the things that my brother wasn't able to overcome.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about Randy and what when you saw the struggle kind of become public, and just kind of set up the scene a little bit for us, because it's a tough story.
Sure. Yeah, so my brother and I grew up in a family that was abusive. We had both internal in our small family and then extended. So we both suffer physical and emotional abuse, and then we were both sexually abused by extended family members, not our parents. And so I think in that process, we both were carrying scars by the time we were 7 and 8 years old, and dealing with that. And then as I went to college and he went to a special school for gifted math and science students, we lost touch a little bit because there's no cell phones and it's hard to get to see each
Different
other.
day and time,
we were
right.
poor, and so, but over time we began to reconnect. But I think the first time I really understood that my brother was having some issues was when I went to graduate school in Colorado, and he was in college at LSU in Baton Rouge, and his first year he ended up in a mental hospital, contemplating suicide. And so he's written about that later in some of his social media posts. He talks about the fact that he was struggling and what he was struggling with and how he was hiding what was happening in our family because, we moved around a lot. We didn't have a lot of big relationships with other families for long periods of time. And so all of that created this sort of special cycle where we thought, well, this is just how every family is. I mean, every child gets bruises. Every child has these things happen. And so I think once he went in the mental hospital, that's when the scales from my eyes started to fall, and I started to understand what we'd actually been through. And that's, I think, when looking back and based on things he wrote, that's when he started thinking, maybe there's something wrong with me. Maybe I'm not a boy. Maybe I'm a girl. So he was about probably 18, 19 years old at that point.
So what was it that, I mean, it's just such a big leap from I'm dealing with trauma, I'm not sure what's wrong. I'm struggling. I'm trying to figure it out too. Maybe I'm not a boy. I mean, it's at such a dramatic leap. Was there influence in his life that led it?
Well, I'm not sure because he was never real clear with me about that in the time that we spent together in the next several years. But what I do know is he was really broken.
I was just to say, he was broken.
You know, and I think about that a lot as a believer when I look at Genesis and it says God made man and woman and he said it was good. And I think a lot about the people who are really struggling with this issue. They're really broken in a way that they can't accept
Which
themselves.
means they're vulnerable.
And so they're vulnerable. And I think also that's just how broken they are. I mean, it creates a lot of compassion to me for people who are really struggling with this because they are really dealing with some serious things. And so he was, I think, in his case, he was looking for an external way to fix what had happened inside to make him acceptable. And, you know, for me, I was looking for, God says I'm acceptable, so how do I make the thing in my heart that I know from God match in my head that I am acceptable because of the abuse? You just think, you know, there's something wrong with me because, of course, my parents wouldn't love me. Right. Nobody would treat you that way if they loved you, so it must be me. I must be wrong because parents are supposed to love.
Unfortunately, a lot of kids think that, and the mental health industry has become extremely frustrating to me. We've talked about this on other shows that parents just don't trust the mental health industry, and they don't know where to go because you're trying to find somebody who's going to help and heal, and instead they're saying you're the person who's wrong. You just need to accept that there's something different, and it's just become this whole. It doesn't deal with the root cause. Right. It doesn't help you be able to address what it was that caused the pain to begin with. They just cover it up with layers of other things.
Right. And that's what happened with your brother, right? Right. He went to counseling and all of a sudden it's like, okay, we're going to just do all this surgeries and fix you, but we don't get fixed because the core issue is still needs healing.
Right. Yeah, so this first time he was hospitalized started a long process of over 10 years of thinking he was and then backing out of it, and then he moved to Seattle and he thought he was again, and then he backed out, and then he moved to Denver near where we lived and was there with us for about 3 years, and we spent a lot of time together talking about the trauma we'd been through, and that was probably the healthiest we ever saw him. During that period of time, our son was born, and he was part of, this. We'd waited 9 years before God had blessed us with a child, and so he'd been part of that. And then he got this great job with his company because he was so good at what he did, and he moved to Chicago. Right. And we saw signs of the depression returning when we'd see him on family things or at my grandma's funeral. And then one day he just called and said, this is what I've decided to do, and I have this new name, and I would like you to come meet with my counselor in Chicago. And, my husband Eric and I, we took some time to pray about it and think about it because, our son is 23 years old, so he was 2, 3, 4 years old. So this is a long time ago that this was all happening.
And how do you handle that, right?
Yeah, and so we spent a lot of time praying, like, should we go? What should we do? What's this going to be like to see him dressed as a woman? And he wants us to use this new name, and but we decided that we would go. And that 2-3 hour session with the counselor was very eye-opening for us about what was happening. It was very different than the counselors I had, who were very much about the truth and how there's freedom in truth and how do we match the truth. And not that I was having gender issues, but just the truth of I'm broken and something's basically wrong with me as a person. His counselor, during that 3 hour session, we found out her husband was the one doing the surgery, and she was the mental health sign-off for that.
Could be a conflict of interest.
Huge conflict of interest. When we were on a break with my brother and he had left the room, she started asking me questions about the trauma I had mentioned in the earlier session. And I told her what I just told you, and she had no idea about any of it. And I thought that was strange because it had been over a year that she'd been counseling him, and she had no idea that he'd been abused in any way.
Oh my goodness.
How do you miss that?
Yeah.
How do you miss that? And then
they don't want to know.
Right. And then I think that's true. And then in frustration, my husband asked her in that same period, well, how many people have you turned down for this surgery that your husband's going to do? And she said, none. And we just sat there, and then she said, well, I mean, by the time they get to me, they've made the decision, and my job is to help them figure out how to get there. And so that was her answer.
That's sad.
Yeah, it was sad. The other thing I think we saw in that counseling session is that she was starting to try and create barriers between us and him and lay seeds for us so that this became a situation where we were going to have to make a choice at some point between him and us. And I think that was maybe part of her goal to do that.
It was. And Kimberly and I know this too because we've interviewed so many detransitioners, parents of kids that were in a gender crisis, and they separated the parents with the child. They made the family members become the bad guy.
Yeah, that's what she was beginning to do. And I thought that things were going pretty well. My brother had talked to me about something I'd done when I was 9, and, I apologized for it because I didn't even remember doing it, but I cared about him, and I thought, I probably did it, we're 9. I probably did say that to him at 9. And then, I thought things were going well. And then she brought out that our son, who was 3.5, 4 years old at this point, my brother wanted to have a relationship as auntie with our son. And so we lived in Colorado. He lived in Chicago. And I was taken aback. And again, this was not, there was no public conversations about this kind of thing, so I had no idea.
20 years ago.
Yeah.
And that kind of stymies me that this was 20 years ago. And so and it's one of the things I kept telling moms is it's been there.
Yeah.
It's just now you're aware, and we're aware that it could, because it's so prevalent, but that it's been there even 20 years ago.
Yeah, yeah. And so as we were talking to her and talking to my brother, I asked the question, because I wanted to understand, why do you want us to tell Aaron about this? What's important about
Meaning
that?
your son.
Our son,
Yeah.
right. And his answer and her answer sort of surprised me because I thought it would be, well, your brother wants to have a relationship with him. He was there right after he was born. He's known him since he was a baby. But that wasn't the answer at all. The answer was, well, your son can know about this, and he can go to preschool next year, and he can tell all of his friends about it, and then they'll all see how normal this is, and it'll be good for this.
Normalizing it.
Right.
And they wanted to
Even 20 years ago.
They wanted to affect that child. And even just the fact that we're talking about 20 years ago, I think when we think about it, things like these were going on, but it's social media has put this at the forefront.
Oh, that is a very good point.
We didn't have all this
very good
garbage
point.
in this super highway.
Right.
So it was
Or
happening.
phones in their hands.
Right. And so it's gone, it's obviously completely out of control now. So what happened to Randy then?
So, unfortunately, as she created these seeds of discontent, when we finally, a week later, had a conversation with my brother and said, we're not willing to tell our 4-year-old about this because he doesn't need this kind of information and confusion, and I'm trying to create a different kind of life for my child than I grew up in. And he started screaming at me, you hate me, I know you've never loved me, and never want to speak to you again. And then he went radio silent for a long time. So we heard through the grapevine, different people, that he was having surgeries, and then he had the final surgery. And then a few years later, after that final surgery, he called me. And we talked for about an hour about having a real relationship. I expressed my forgiveness for the way he cut me out, but I really wanted to have a relationship with him that was beyond gender because we'd grown up together. And then it was a very strange conversation, no real reconciliation, but I had some hope because he'd reached out and he'd moved. I found out in that call he'd moved to Washington again.
Would you say, Joy, that you kind of felt like he was settled now because he had the surgery? He was supposed to be in a better spot because of the surgery, right?
Yeah, exactly. You would think that, but there was something in that call that just, for me, as somebody who'd known him all growing up, I just thought something was off and I wasn't sure. And then about 2 months later, I got a call from my dad while I was driving home that they found his body, that he had killed himself.
Oh my God.
And as we went through the process and learned more about it, we found out that the night before he killed himself, he was asking a friend if God could forgive him for what he'd done. And so I think as the story unrolled, we found out after the final surgery, he started questioning and realizing that this big lie is what we've been calling it in Kansas. This big lie, actually, he couldn't become a woman. It didn't solve his problem because he's a really broken person.
Right.
And he was struggling with that. So at the end, he gave up the fight. And so I think, for
Sorry.
our family, it's been, I lost my brother to this lie. And I think what's ironic about that is that there are counselors out there who will say, still to this day, say, well, if he hadn't had the surgery, he'd be more likely to commit suicide. All the data says that's not
Exact
true.
opposite.
It's the exact opposite. So taking him down this path with a group of people that clearly cared only about his money. He'd moved to Washington because when he started questioning, everyone backed away from him and didn't want anything to do. The doctors didn't want to help. His friends had pushed him down that, weren't real friends, and this truth started coming out, and I think it was just too much for him to bear. Yeah.
So he moved to Washington hoping that he would find a new life, new friends?
I think he was just trying to start over. Yeah, from what we've heard.
And it's hard when you are broken and you hear these stories because he was young, right?
He was young when it started. He was 40 when he died.
That's a young
Oh my
life.
gosh, he dealt with that for 20 years.
Yeah, 20 years. It's been 10 years since he died. So, I mean, you just think back when we think about why did this all show up in 2020? Well, it's been going on and being seeded for decades in our country, this idea that you can do these things. And we talked about counselors a minute ago, even in the DSM and in the counseling circles, they've been telling counselors that gender dysphoria is not really a mental illness, it's just a condition, and this is the way you treat it. And they've been experimenting on our people for a long time. And even in that meeting, the counselor said to me, well, if your counselor said this, if they're going to say this, then that they could lose their license. And I thought, well, I'm not going to tell you anything about my counselor.
Right.
He's
Yeah,
really
we're not going
good.
to give you their name or anything.
Yeah.
And this is one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the show, because I think I say it, but it's validation. It's always been there. It's been there. We just had a show about Alfred Kinsey. We were talking about how this whole sexual revolution has led to this. And if you can convince people they aren't who they are, and you create a void, then they have to fill that void with something. And usually what they fill it with is not good.
Yeah, and I think
Right.
too, just the fact too that for our moms that are watching from your perspective, the importance of this, because a lot of our moms are told crazy things like, "Do you want a dead son or a live daughter?" And they start this really mind game where they fall into this practice or this accepting or trying to be loving and kind. And at the end of the day, it's the same thing with your brother. It's a broken soul that has an issue, and the gender changing doesn't help at all.
You know, another travesty about this is that they are pushing so hard against, what are they calling it? A religious intervention or something.
Oh, right.
And so when you have the faith-based counseling, those counselors are really dedicated to making sure that they do help and heal. And now they're told, oh no, don't go there, don't go there. They don't understand. But what I'm seeing is that a lot of these counselors are struggling because they could lose their license. The whole mental health industry has become a bully and and their targets. If they are going to the actual purpose of mental health, they're targets.
Right.
That's why parents are so concerned.
I mean, I think there need to be protections for counselors to know,
Sure.
because in some states they have to actually get signed consent to be able to even talk about the fact that, maybe this is a gender dysphoria issue and you're not actually a woman and you want to work through the issues that are driving that. And they have to get special things signed to even be able to offer that kind of counseling. And I think that's important. We need to make those changes. But to your point about moms, I think this is an issue where people are trying to make this an or situation and it's an and situation. Here's what I mean. People will say, you let me do the thing I want because you love me, or I have nothing to do with you. And I've heard parents dealing with this say, no, I don't agree with this thing that you're doing, and I love you because you're my child, and I will always love you.
Good point.
We can be and people, and I think with Randy and his counselor, they were trying to set up these or situations, and counselors and doctors sometimes do that. They seed that, and that's what evil does. I mean, frankly, this is really a spiritual battle that we're in.
Yeah.
But and says, God says, I love you and you are sinful.
Right.
I love you and you need Jesus. I'm going to send Jesus for you. And so as people of God, I think that's our job, is to say, I don't agree with this. I know you're not a woman. I birthed a son and I love you. And we'll work through the difficulties together. So, but I think that's important for people to remember.
It's just so odd to be in a place where these are the discussions that we're having.
Right.
It's like common sense needs to be returned. One of the things I tell moms all the time is you need to be reading The Emperor's New Clothes to your children 3 or 4 times a week, because that's exactly what we're dealing with. I mean,
Right.
but the fact that it has become so deeply rooted into places that used to be safe places where you could go to get help, that to me is just demonic. Right. When you have counselors who are now telling you exact the opposite of what you need to heal. And those who want to heal you are being punished and bullied and intimidated for doing it. That is just, I don't even know what to say about that.
Yeah. I mean, as a person who's had real therapy to deal with the trauma of my life, when you go in a counselor's room, you're giving them authority in your life to speak into.
It's very vulnerable.
It is very vulnerable.
I've been in counseling. I was abused as a child, and I went into counseling, and my dad always was afraid of counselors. He was terrified of counselors, and it kind of bred that in me. And when when one of my children needed counseling, I was terrified. Right. And this was 20 years ago. I was terrified. It's more than 20 years ago. He's 30. Oh my gosh, he's 39 years old. But he was suffering from 3 out of the 5 neurological disorders, and I was like, I don't know how to deal with this, but I was terrified. Yeah, but when I went, and it took a while, but I finally found a good counselor, and that counselor ended up helping me. And I'm sitting there listening, and I'm like, hey, that's actually helpful. So you go in vulnerable, right, and you're expecting you trust,
and you want somebody to help you with this thing that you're dealing with that's so personal that you're not sharing with everyone around you, and so you put it on the table and you're trusting that the person on the other side is going to pick it up and look at it with you and help you make good decisions. And too often, we've got these sets of counselors out there that they just aren't, and you hear these stories about being aggressive on hormones in a few hours.
Puberty blockers within 24 hours. You're scheduled for surgery,
and they herald it. They tell people this is how good we are, how fast we can do it.
Yeah. As I've told this story in the campaign here and there, when people ask me about things like how do we keep schools from hiding it from parents, and we talk about policy ideas, afterwards there's always someone that comes up. And recently we had some Turning Point kids in one of our meet and greets, and one of them came up to me and just shared the story that happened in his family and how his brother's gone. They don't know where he is, right, and he's gone through this whole path. And with tears in his eyes, he's telling me this story. And I think over and over, I'm seeing that in great families that love their children. They're running into this situation, and then they're trying to figure out what to do. And so one of the things we've tried to do in our campaign is also equip people with truth and help them know. I think, when Riley Gaines stood up and said, this is wrong, it started a courage in our country to say, we can actually call things wrong that are wrong. And so how do we continue to do that? And the more people that will stand up and say it's wrong and fight back against it, then the more chance we have to stop it in its tracks.
Yeah. We provide a lot of resources to our moms, too, on gender confusion.
Yes.
So, I'm so glad that you came and told the story, and the fact that it was 20 years ago. It's been going on for a long time. And this is an opportunity now that we know that we can counter it. And I'm glad you're running for governor.
Sorry that you lost your brother over this.
Very sorry about that.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
After this break, a former strategist in the Latino Democratic Party of Los Angeles stayed true to his faith, left the party, and turned down millions to keep his mouth shut. Find out what he knew when we come back.
America is under attack. Our families are being crushed under the politics of a radical agenda. But moms have had enough. We are standing up and we are fighting back.
This is our battle. This battle is every bit as important as the Revolutionary War because we fight for the same thing.
Moms for America is a national movement of moms reclaiming our culture for truth, family, freedom, and the Constitution.
I think Moms for America is exactly on track and is doing the right thing for the future of our country and our children.
Like Moms for America is going at the heart of the issue.
But I am honored to join Moms for America today as we speak out against the horrific mandates.
With a national network of over 500,000 mothers, Moms for America is one of the fastest growing movements of women in the country.
Well, the most dangerous place in all of nature is between a mama bear and her baby cub.
We are the change. No matter what, no matter where, and no matter how difficult the obstacles are that are facing us and our families, we will not give up and we will not give in.
So if not now, then when? If not you, then who?
Welcome to the Momland Revolution. Bernal has spent his life fighting for faith, family, and community. He is a former strategist and organizer for the Latino Democratic Party in Los Angeles. He eventually shifted his allegiance away from the Democratic Party after recognizing the dangers of political manipulation and moral compromise. Benito, it is great to have you on the Mom View today.
Welcome.
Thank you. It is an honor to be on this show. And let me tell you, it's not a coincidence because as we get in the conversation, you're going to see how God has been working in this particular movement, especially with the mothers since 2006.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, okay. So I want to jump into when we met. I know we were going to talk about the Democratic Party, but we met at an event in California. Mm-hmm. And for the last 4 years, God put it on my heart that every speech I was to give, whether it was 5 minutes or 15 minutes, I needed to include the history of Hitler, Stalin, and Mao. Mm. And so I did at that event. And when I sat down, you leaned over and said, "You have no idea how right you are." Yeah. I was there at the table when they decided to take the rainbow. And I was like, wait, what? I was like, we need to have you on the show. So we will get into that. But I just want to learn more about, why was it that originally you felt that the Democratic Party was what was going to serve the Latino community? Yeah.
Well, my family comes from Michoacan, Mexico. I was born here in the United States. It's a cultural thing. You're Hispanic, you're a Democrat. It's a hardworking family. So a lot of what I was raised on aligned with the Democratic Party, but we're talking about a different Democrat Party.
Sure.
See, that back then we considered it more the Kennedy Party, the Kennedy Democrats.
Right. Yeah.
Far from that now. So it's something I was born into.
Yeah, more left to center, not progressive.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So and through the years after when we first met and we talked about we mentioned the rainbow, right? So my history, my name Benito comes from Benito Juarez, Benito Canales, back in the days. I didn't know that until my dad was dying and I asked him, "Dad, where did I get my name from? Why am I always fighting for people?" He says, "Because it's in your blood. Mm-hmm. It's been in your blood. It's something that you were raised on, so on and so forth." Because I started in middle school, high school, class president, so on and so forth, but never thought I would get into politics. Okay. It was never my plan to get into politics. And it wasn't until you grow up in the Raza movement, the Chicano movement, and always blaming the white man for the failures, right? Mm. So I said, well, why don't we build our own Latino political machine? Let's run for every level of government and eventually the presidency, right? Not a revolution where you're going to go to war against your country, but let's do our own thing. And 5 issues, and I want you to understand these 5 issues, especially you mothers. I want you mothers to understand these 5 issues that we're faced with today. So it was illegal immigration, which was number 1. So gang violence, teenage dropout, teenage pregnancy, the abuse in the welfare system, and illegal immigration. This was the Democrat Party 25 years ago.
That was the goal. Right?
That was the goal, to address those issues, run for every level of government, and eventually the presidency in 2028, right around the corner. So years go by. 4 years, we meet in a private little room like this, and I asked a question. I said, "Gentlemen, our plan was what I just laid out to you, I said, now things are even worse. So who do we blame now? None of them would look at me. The one gentleman that controls them, he's a lobbyist and a developer. He says, Benito, let me ask you 3 questions. He says, number one, and think about this. He says, number one, if we solve all these issues you're talking about, then what issues will our candidates run on the next time they run for office? Number 2, do you realize how much money comes into our city and our states because of the problems we're dealing with? NGOs, nonprofit organizations, right? And number 3, because I was a union vice president for SEIU, do you realize how many jobs it creates? So I look around the room, no one's looking at me, and I said, so what? Let me make sure I understand this. So what you're telling me is we're going to exploit the sufferings of our community? We're not going to address the issues because there's money to be made and power? And he just goes, that's the Marxist way.
Oh my God.
And that was
shocking.
such a red flag for me, like, whoa, wait a minute.
Did you see that coming?
No.
Okay.
No. So, I mean, I grew up with these guys,
Right.
you know. I've mentored them when they were kids. It's like, there's no way I saw that coming.
Right.
You know, so I'm looking at them and I'm just like, well, I'll tell you what. I said, from this day forward, I'm going to do everything I can to expose you guys. It's been about, that was back in probably 2002. You know, I said, I'm going to do everything I can to expose you guys. A few weeks go by, I'm offered $2 million to just turn around and walk away. I said, you don't get it. I said, that void in my heart has been filled by the Holy Spirit. I don't need your money.
So I wanted to pay you off to be quiet.
Turn around and walk away. Then it was a death threats. I have 6 children. I can't be in 6 different places at one time.
Right.
You know, but I'm a man of faith. This is how I came to the Lord, is through politics. I was always a Catholic, but never had a relationship with the Lord. And then through the politics, I fell on my knees one day and I said, Lord, I said, I really need your help. If you are real, God, I need your help because I'm trying to do the right thing here. And now they're threatening my life and my children's life. The next day, I don't remember the congressman's name. The next day, I get a phone call from a congressman. I understand you need some help. And I'm just like, wait, what? You know? And that's where my life just totally changed. You know, everything was about Jesus being the center of it all. You know, so, you know, that's, years go by. I'd be banging up my head against the wall like, Lord, why do you still have me here in the Democrat Party? Not the Democratic Party. Don't use that name because it's the Democrat Party, right? So why do you still have me here? He goes, because I need you mentoring the future leaders of that party because there's going to be
So you
spiritual war.
stayed
I stayed
there.
within the party until 2016.
Okay.
And then in 2016, actually 2006, when I pulled up 2016 is when the Lord said, you're going to run for office. But get this. He says, you're going to run for Congress against Tony Cardenas, my high school buddy that not a buddy, but a friend, you know, that I helped get into office, you know. You're going to run against him. But here's what he said. You're not going to raise any money. You're not going to knock on any doors. You're just going to get your name on the ballot. And I'm thinking, okay, how do you win a race like that? But it was something he was trying to teach me. It's not about getting you into office. It's about giving you that platform to be able to speak the truth, to wake this nation up.
And your speech was incredible at that event.
I tell you, God is amazing. When you just put your trust in God, and I think that's the problem where faith was today, I try to tell people to understand. But I will say this. In 2006, you had the redefinition of marriage. Remember that was coming out in 2008?
Yeah, it was.
So I heard the voice of the Lord. He tells me, you need to wake up the churches. He says, because this has nothing to do with them being recognized as husband and wife. Or husband and husband, right? A marriage.
Right.
It's about setting a precedent in the courts.
Sure.
So then they can come after, marry their children. Remember?
That's right.
So when I went
Adoption, all that, yeah.
And I went to the churches and I shared this with them, and guess what? They kicked me out. The churches didn't want to hear it. So the Lord told me I think it was 2008, 2009, the moms are going to make the difference.
Yeah, they
The
do.
mothers
Well,
are
we
going
knew
to
this.
change
Sure
this.
do.
And that's
That's why we call them the heartbeat of the home and the heartbeat of our country.
exactly, and that's why when you gave me the invitation to come here, I said, Lord, well, I took some years, but I see where you're going now, you know. But okay, because it's all about God's timing, right?
Yeah.
And we get the death threats every day, but it's like, you know what? If you really walk with God, you know. I may not have a lot of hair on my head, but you know what? The Lord says, you can't touch a hair if he doesn't let you. And I always throw back to the union leaders when they threatened me up in old San Juan, Puerto Rico, when we were there for the union convention, when Obama was going to run for president. I was the only one opposing him publicly, and I just said, for me to live is Christ, to die is gain. I said, my purpose here on work, I'm going to serve it for the Lord. I said, as long as I have a breath of life, I'm going to continue to speak that.
So there's a guy, Curtis Bowers. You familiar with him?
No.
Okay, so he lives in Idaho, and he did these movies, Agenda and Agenda 2, and it was Grinding Down of America.
Okay, yes.
And he was talking about how he went into this. There was supposed to be some communist meeting, and he's going to go in with all these, beach bums and radicals and everything. And he goes in to this meeting, and he sees these people in three-piece suits and briefcases, and they're sitting there talking about how they're going to take the environmentalist movement and they're going to use that to tear down the country. And all these people, several of the people who were there, like, no, that's crazy. That's not ever going to do anything. And these leaders who were like 4 or 5 of them that were on the stage, like, that's what we're going to do. So I keep thinking when you're talking about the rainbow flag, taking the rainbow, you're like my fly on the wall. So I kept thinking there's probably going to be this discussion where it's like, that's crazy. Why would we do that? Like, no, that's what we're going to do. Is that how
You tell this
kinda
story.
Yeah, part of the plan was we talked about the 5 different issues, right? But the biggest plan was, first of all, we're going to take God out of the picture.
Sure.
How are we going to do that? They're going to take the Bibles out of the hotels, because when people have problems, they go to a hotel, whatever, and sometimes you pull out a Bible, and a lot of people get saved through that.
Yeah.
We're going to remove God from every government institution, so on and so forth, including the schools. Then we're going to break down the nuclear family. How are you going to break down the nuclear family? I grew up coaching kids. I mentor young boys. My brothers and I have done it for 30 years. We use sports as a means to keep them away from gangs and drugs, and then we compete in front of D1, D2 schools, and they get a free ride, right? But so what they did was they were going to make it impossible for families to own a home. So what they were going to do, they were going to make it so difficult for either parent to stay home and watch over their kids.
Sure.
So then what happened? So then now these kids end up in the schools.
Right.
So they were focusing on running school board members, so on and so forth. Now we indoctrinate within the schools.
So you're saying they. Who is the they? Was it
They-
the Democrat leadership in California?
It's a leadership, and it's majority Democrats and union leaders, but there are some Republicans. So it's not just a Democrat issue.
I am very well aware. It's
Yeah.
both.
But wasn't there a meeting or something where you heard them even kind of tipping off that they were going to address the LGBTQ?
Well, that's where I was leading to. So in removing God, it was changing the definition of the rainbow, and that's when it got to the level of being in the schools. So if you look back at textbooks in the schools going back to 2006, 2008, you used to see a husband and wife with a family. Go back and look at them textbooks. Go back 8 years ago, 10 years ago. You don't see the husband and wife. You don't see mom and dad. You don't see a family. You see a mom with kids. You see a dad with kids. Or you see 2 moms or you see 2 dads. So they've slowly started indoctrinating our children, confusing
And
them.
they started by the flag. It's just every time I think about Curtis Bowers and they said we're going to take environmentalism and that's crazy. We're going to take the rainbow. What are you talking about? And yet look how they planned this out so far in advance.
And they knew they were going to take over the education system.
Yeah.
That's been a long time. They knew they would take the mother out of the home. So it's been so calculated, but it's so disturbing that they've taken the rainbow flag.
Taken the rainbow and turned it into
the rainbow, and it's God's covenant, and
Their rainbow stands for what?
promise.
Pride.
Oh, pride. Yeah.
And what does the Bible say about pride?
Yeah.
Right? Pride is what destroys
right.
a person in a
That's right.
nation. So I see the spiritual connection, and that's what I try to get people to understand.
So we need to decide pride or promise.
Yeah, pride or promise. Which is it going to be? But you mothers, you have a humongous calling upon yourselves. And it's the mothers that are going to make a difference. And what I told the Republican leadership in California that totally ignored me, I said, you have 10 to 15 years to flip California when I joined the party in 2016. I said, because a generation of abuelitas, which is the grandmothers and the mothers, they're going to be gone in 15 years. And if you don't do it now, because they still have influence over their children.
Right.
And if you ignore it, we're going to lose.
We talk a lot about the grandmas in our organization because they are wise. They have that legacy. They understand they've lived through, economic hardships, and they've seen culture change, and really are the voice of reason.
Yes.
Well, and there's something about the, I mean, I say this all the time. You mess with Mama Bear, that's dangerous. You mess with Grammy Grizzly, that's toxic. And that's, I mean, because there's something about when I hold my grandchildren, I always tell people they're the fuel for my fire. This is why I'm out there. This is why I'm fighting. Don't mess with me, grandkids. So if you think Mama Bear is dangerous, you do not want to mess with Grammy Grizzly.
You're absolutely right. And that's why I believe that God was really, I heard very clearly it was going to be the mothers in the Gen Z. You know?
That's what I've been saying.
The Gen Z.
Because they've been asking all these questions. I keep telling people, stop rolling your eyes when they ask questions. They're sincere.
They're looking for
yes,
answers.
They are looking for answers, and they are seeking truth.
Yes.
And I have so much faith in that. And then the fact that we started over again, my grandchildren are the alpha generation. They're the ones who are going to save us, but we have to give them something worth saving.
Absolutely.
And Gen Z is our bridge to get there.
It is, and that's why we started the Gen Z. We started a group called 180 Shift, Gen Z 180 Shift. We had 2 young girls,
They're great. I was on their show. They're awesome.
Because we were going out to meetings, and I'm 61 years old. I was 59 back then when my wife kind of recognized this. She goes, "We're the youngest ones in this room,"
So good.
Yeah, but God had been telling me for years about creating a group of that. So I waited for His timing, and it came about 3.5 years ago. We got the Gen Z 180 Shift going, and started pushing them out there, getting more publicity, talking about the real hard issues.
Right.
And look at now some of their postings are getting 11 million views. They're in different countries, but it's the message coming from them. I said, see, I can talk to this younger generation, and they may hear 50% of what I say.
I'm not sure they hear that much.
But when you talk to them,
they're
open. Because first they want to challenge you.
Yes.
But if you come out with the right messaging, with a message that's not challenging them, but is opening up their hearts.
Can I ask what's happening in the Latino community right now? What are you seeing? Where are we going there? Because we have a Hispanic outreach. We've got a lot of Latino
growing
moms.
rapidly of moms and
I was just curious what you're seeing with that community.
Well, let's immigration's a big issue, right? Illegal immigration, right? So I told a lot of the Republican leadership and other people in the past that immigration is their last deck on their card because they know that's going to create a race war. COVID, indoctrinating is where they put all their eggs in one basket.
Yeah.
The Democrat and the unions and so on and so forth.
Right.
They thought with that they were going to be able to turn over this country. When they realized they were failing it because of our messaging, the things that we did, waking up the Latino community, because for Hispanics and Latinos, in the heart, our children, you do not touch.
Right.
So that hit the wrong nerve. So I warned people, I said, if we don't go on the opposition first, they're going to come out with the immigration issue and we're going to be up against the wall defense. They didn't want to do it. So we did what we could to bring the issue out. So do they care about immigration? Illegal immigrants coming? No, they don't. No, they don't. All it is, it's when first and second generation Americans of Mexican descent, because that's where I come from, right? When we got to a point in our life when we were educated enough, informed enough to realize that our own leaders aren't there for us, they're there for their own pockets, the majority walked away. We call them the Chicano movement, right? So the Chicano movement are Americans of Mexican descent who love this country, veterans, so on and so forth, So they realize, okay, so now what we have to do is we lost with the indoctrinator of the kids. We use immigration, we open the borders, we bring in that voter base that they lost. It's all about a voter base, and I can go back into that when vote by mail ballots.
Right.
25 years ago, when they were like, hey, I realized my buddy's dad had died away, but yet he was still on the polls. I was like, what's going on?
You were sitting at like all the tables when the nefarious ideas were being put up.
Everything was there, but you know what? Everything is about God's timing.
Yeah.
Because I mean,
the great reveal. I mean, really, it's people have to have the ears to hear and the eyes to see.
Absolutely. And the Word of God says in the last days, because my wife would say, baby, how is it that people like what happened with Charlie Kirk? Yeah. How can people be laughing at that? I said, baby, what does the Word of God say? People are going to have eyes to see and ears to hear, but they're not going to see it or hear it. Why? Because it's a spiritual war that we're in.
Yes,
so our battle, yes, majority is spiritual. So, and I'll connect this with the Republican Party. So when I joined the Republican Party in 2016, there was some documents that I had. I was running for Congress against Tony. Tony was facing sexual allegations of a minor that he had raped. He had drugged and raped. This is a congressman, right? It's in the media that there's a powerful politician out there who did something wrong, couldn't be named until it went back to court. Judge had determined there was enough evidence. I went to that court hearing. Judge said, yes, I still got the documents. Named him, Tony Cardenas. Whatever happened to that? Nothing happened to that.
Nothing.
He was allowed to use our money, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, I could be mistaken on this, tax-paying dollars to hire attorneys to defend him. But eventually that young girl, so what happened was when I was running against him, people were saying, why don't you put that out there? I said, because there's a victim. If the victim doesn't give me permission, I'm not going to destroy her life any more than what she's already been destroyed. So I was able to connect with the family, and they weren't ready for that. So fine, it's not God's time yet.
That was good that you.
Yeah, now it's God's time. Now she's willing to speak up. Many people are willing to speak up.
I know, and you so just from your experience, and I mean, I told you I worked hard to track you down because you are proof. You were there. You saw the evidence that this is a holy war and this is evil against good. And you saw it right there at these table discussions with these wealthy, smart people in suits saying, we're going to take the rainbow. We're going to destroy the family. We're not
going to fix the issues that we're concerned about.
COVID. Let's talk about COVID. In the public sector, I was a vice president for SEIU, right? Public sector. The opposition to the leftist evil agenda in the public sector were the conservatives. So people of faith with deep faith. So how do you get rid of these people? They couldn't terminate us. I mean, if you looked at my personnel file, I don't have a folder. I have a box because they would write me up every week. They were trying to get rid of me, But and it said, but if God has a purpose, and God has a purpose, But these evil people, it's all about evil, is what I want to get to.
Yeah.
And I want people to understand that, yes, you have a Republican Party and a Conservative Party. But right now in California, what's going on there with the California leadership and the Republican Party, I'm not only having to fight, or I should say our side is not only having to fight the Democrat Party, but even the leadership within Los Angeles and California.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it very difficult for us. So I've been doing this 30 years. I've never been paid a penny for what I do. Not even as union vice president. I wouldn't even put them gas allowances in because it was members' money. But so the unions in the districts figured, how do we get rid of this voice? They used COVID under the mandates.
Yeah.
Because they knew people like me of faith were not going to inject ourselves with that.
Oh, yeah.
So once they got
really
rid
did.
of us, it exploded.
That is it.
And you see the connection.
They're great chess players.
They are, and they have patience, and I thank you so much. I'm glad I was able to track you down and bring you on the show, and I hope moms, all of you out there, realize that this is a spiritual warfare. And while yes, we're exposing the Democrat Party, it is in both parties.
It is,
and we need to start looking at our values, our convictions. Look at the people that you're voting for, and inform yourself. And if you're not sure, come to us. We do the best that we can to do the research.
Absolutely.
So thank you again, and we will be back with more in the Mom View right after this break. Such an incredible show.
Yeah.
Great interviews, topics that we needed to cover.
Everything from gender to the Democratic Party.
Yeah. Well, it kind of ties in because the Marxist, globalist, Islamist trifecta of evil, it always keeps coming back to that. And they're using our kids to destroy their own future.
Yeah.
And they want the adults out of the way. And I'm not going to have it. I'm going to stand on those front lines no matter what. Absolutely. But I think moms want to know how can they protect their kids? What can they do? And they want to run for office, rally in Washington. They don't need to do that. We're here to support the Moms for America, but there are things that they can do to help protect their
absolutely. I mentioned it just earlier that we have a gender confusion brochure pamphlet with all kinds of information. We have a lot of podcasts. I think about Dr. Grossman. She was on our podcast.
She was amazing.
Where she said, don't affirm your kids, just love your kids. Yeah. But as soon as you start that journey, we just talked about this with Joy, you start this journey, you let them start calling the shots. Yeah. They're a child. So she's got a lot of great books. We've got a lot of information on our website regarding this topic. And I think that's it, moms. If we're educated, this is what we always say, if we empower and inspire moms, they then affect their home, their kids, their community, and they share the truth. And these are some very, very tough battles.
Well, and I've met some pretty tough moms who are immovable, just like what Miriam said. She's like, I never affirmed them. My son was a son. He was always going to be my son, but I loved him, and I loved him no matter what. And that, if you can put that wedge in between what the world is trying to tell them. But I mean, we heard what Joy said. They were purposely trying to separate the parents from the children. Again, that was a communist goal.
And I always say to my kids too, even when we didn't agree on something, I would say, no one loves you more.
That's right.
Than mom and dad.
Every single day. I tell parents this all the time. You need to remind your kids, we are on the same team. No one will love you as much as I do. If there's anything that ever makes you feel dark or uncomfortable, you come tell me and we'll deal with it together.
No
and read The Emperor's New Clothes 3 or 4 times a week to your kids and your grandkids so that they'll
do you wake up with that book and go to bed with that book in your house?
I have 5 different copies of that book in my house. And I'm like, which one is your favorite one, to my grandchildren? And they'll pick it. They know that story inside and out. And then we can have a discussion about it. So what was it that made the boy stand up and realize what everybody else could see? You know, really great discussions about that.
It is.
So
it empowers them.
It is. Another thing is these smartphones. We have got to not give our kids smartphones. And and it is so true that when you give your child a smartphone, you're not giving them the world. You're giving the world access to them.
Yeah,
they don't need access to the world. They're not ready for access to the world, but the world wants access to them. Yeah. So you really need to think about that.
And there's a lot of safety nets now. There's Bark. There's a lot of different programs that would help parents. The other one that I thought was kind of interesting is they do the Apple, like a watch instead of a phone. They still can text. You know, there's all kinds of different ideas out there with dealing with technology, or no technology, like we've actually had that gal come on about screen time. It's the elephant in the room. Every parent has to figure it out, but you have to figure out the safety nets.
That's right.
You have to postpone it as far as you can.
Know the consequences.
Yeah.
And then on Benito, I just want to say it's very important that we look at the people. We stop looking at parties. Ladies, stop looking at the parties. Look at the people. And we're here.
And the platform.
That's right, and the platform. And we're here to help you as best as we can.
Yeah.
We have Mom Vote. We have a lot of resources there. So do your due diligence and realize who it is that's representing you and make sure that they actually represent you and your family.
Yeah.
So check us out at themomview.com. You can see all of our old shows and reruns of our shows. and like and share us on all social media platforms, Instagram, X. You can catch us there at The Real Mom View.
Yeah.
The Real Mom View, at The Real Mom View. So we'll see you next week.
Yeah.
Again in DC, and we're looking forward to having you visit with us.
Thanks for joining us on The Mom View.